Welcome to the North Group podcast. At North Group, we are invited into organizations to influence leadership and organizational behavior. It is absolutely fascinating work. Today, we invite you into one of those conversations.
Today, I am joined by John Gilliland, just a fascinating person that I've had the opportunity to meet through my work here at North Group Consultants. John is the CEO and founder of Investment Real Estate Group of Companies. For short, if you want to go to the website, it's irellc.com. But maybe even better recognized is the Moove In brand of self-storage facilities, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But John is a national leader, and I would call him a guru in the self-storage industry. And the reason that I say that is because John has been inducted into both the Pennsylvania and the National Self-Storage Hall of Fame. Again, more of that to come. John's company has over 100 employees. Do I have that right, John?
That's correct. Over 100 now.
Very good. John is a devoted husband and father, philanthropist, which we'll also talk about here in a minute as we hear more about John's stories. And then John's got a number of fun hobbies that maybe you'll come into the mix here too. But John, your journey to get to where you are today, because what I described sounds like a lot of success, right? It came with some bumps along the way.
Been very blessed, yes, along the way.
So thank you for joining us today. We're here to hear your story, but I'd love to start at the beginning and just tell me a little bit about how you grew up and some of that influence.
Sure. Well, some people know this, and you can figure it out with the self-storage facilities, but I'm a farm boy from central Pennsylvania. I grew up on a dairy farm 18 miles from Penn State University, milking cows. We were fairly progressive farmers, had about 350 cows that we milked.
Wow, that's a
three
lot.
times a day. So we tried even tried 4 times a day for a little bit, but did 3 times a day. So yeah, I was a farm boy, and didn't know that cow manure actually smelled until I went away from the farm, and I came back and went, oh my goodness, that smells a little bit. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Yeah, sure. Very good. So grew up, family, siblings, tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, so mom and dad, and I was the oldest of 3. So my brother Eric and my sister Pam, and then mom and dad, and then we didn't have a lot of money.
Okay.
So farming is a pretty tough business, and Dad was working hard to make sure that was paying the bills. And, and I just remember, lots of stories about growing up, and I never had a pair of boots that didn't leak, right? So we had Stroman Bread, was our local bakery that provided the bread. And so I would take 2 or 3 Stroman bread bags and put them over my feet before I put my boots on to go to the barn in the morning. I mean, that's something we had to do. Frugal beginnings and
hard work.
Learned how to, and a lot of hard work, and learned how to make a penny stretch many, many days. And so lots of fond memories of that early childhood. Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, you learned some entrepreneurial spirit. That came in part from mom, dad, both?
Yeah, I think both. So we're a business family, and my earliest recollection of the entrepreneur, in the family was selling sweet corn. So that's one thing we did. I sold sweet corn on the corner. I probably started out, I'm guessing, 6 or so.
Okay, it's pretty young.
I remember that what we charged for the dozen of corn was 25 cents.
Oh my goodness!
And then over my career,
up
until I was probably 13 or 14, we charged $1. I think was the most for a dozen.
Yes, for
13.
a dozen.
Yeah, it was a dozen. So that was my first. We also had Christmas trees, so we sold Christmas trees every Christmas time, of course, in my grandfather's house down at our little crossroads of our little town of about 350 people. So lots of entrepreneurs. So it was all great and fun, and just a beautiful life looking back at it. And then when I was 15 years old, my mother, who was quite a woman, she was learning how to fly. She always wanted to learn how to fly. And so her and Dad were taking flight lessons out of the University Park Airport. And so she was soloing, so she probably had 30 some hours in, and something happened. She got food poisoning, we think, and got real bad stomach cramps. And while she was soloing, she got, we think, in a spin and spun and wrecked the plane and killed herself.
Oh, yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a huge impact at age 15.
Yeah, really tough times that you can imagine being 15 years old. And so I went from being the ninth grade class president to being the kid in ninth and 10th grade that if you looked at me the wrong way, we were going to be in a fight. And
Okay.
I was mad at the world and mad at most people. And
Understandably so.
Yeah,
but
it was tough.
When we were talking before, I think you referred to them maybe as the rebel years or the not so great years.
Yeah, I was a rebel for sure. So, I mean, so ninth grade, lots of alcohol. We grew up very close to Penn State, and people ask me if I went to Penn State, and my response is that yes, I have, ninth grade through 12th grade socially.
Right.
So I milked the evening milking. This is a crazy story. I would milk the evening milking from 9 o'clock at night. I'm sorry, to 8 o'clock at night till 11:30 or something. We'd finish up.
Sure.
My buddies would sneak out of their house at 14 years old. I had a car, right, at 14. And I bought and paid for with my wages. And so we would drive, of course, illegally at 14 years old, over to the fraternity house, the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity house, the National Ag Fraternity House, which my father was a member of and was the advisor for.
Okay.
So I was little Gilly, right, in ninth and 10th grade, at a fraternity party with kegs and everything else as a young man. So that was my rebel years, and that's what I did in ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, if you can imagine that.
And so sometimes when you hear a story like that, you think, okay, well, you're on a trajectory. It's not going to end well. You're probably not going to maybe graduate college or high school, and you're probably definitely not going to go to college.
Right,
but
exactly.
You somehow made a change. So tell me about that.
The one thing I think that saved me was that I always worked hard. You know, being a farm boy and hard work was a thing in our family.
Normal.
We talked about that all the time.
Right.
And so, grandfathers on both sides of the family, grandmothers and everybody else in the family. So, that was a big deal. So I always worked hard, and I think that's, I was so tired I couldn't stay up all night, so I had to get some sleep before I went to school the next day. And then I left the day after graduation, hangover and everything, for California with everything I owned with a buddy of mine and a friend of ours who was a girl that was going to meet a boyfriend of hers at an Air Force base in Oklahoma. We dropped her off halfway, drove to California. And,
so why California? What prompted that?
So I wanted to be a dairyman, right? And I thought at that point in time that I knew everything there was to know about the dairy business, right? I was 18 years old, on my own, making my thing. So, in fact, I remember my father pointing his finger in my chest going, "You are the smartest that you are ever going to be right now." And he told me that, and I thought, that's the weirdest thing to say, right? And now I understand. And it took me about a year or two that I kind of understood what he was talking about. So I was a smart aleck and thought I knew everything. So I went to work for Berkeley Farms. Okay. One of the first days I was there, it was 120 degrees, in California. And I had to pull the black plastic off the silage pile, which is even hotter, right? Right. So needless to say, after about 10 months there, I realized that, maybe I do want to go to college, and maybe I don't want to be milking cows all my life. I mean, I wanted to be in the dairy business, but on the ownership side, necessarily the milking the cow side. Right. Yeah. So then I just started looking around, and Cal Poly is one of the best colleges in the country for dairy science. Right. There's 2 or 3 or 4 big colleges, and it's one of those. Yep. And so I applied to school there and got accepted. And off to Cal Poly I went. Okay.
Very good. That's fascinating to me. Because with the way you described, just childhood and those bumps along the way, some clearly very difficult times. Who would think that you could even get into like a Cal Poly, but you did.
So, again, when I was in California, I was still a rebel and hung around with the wrong crowd and all that good stuff. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to clean my act up, get to college and get serious about life. And so a lot of my father's friends were Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity brothers that I knew growing up. And just later on, I put a deal like, oh yeah, they're all AGR brothers from Penn State. Okay. And what a cool, cool group of people. Yeah. Yeah. And so who would have ever thought I would join a fraternity to clean up my act, right? But it was a social, and we had lots of fun, but it was a social professional fraternity. We had quite a chapter. There was 105 members in the chapter or something like that. And we were all very, very serious. In fact, our chapter GPA was over 3.0.
Wow. Okay.
All during my 4 years of college, which is
so
phenomenal.
You ended up surrounding yourself then with a really good,
with the right kind of people. Right. There's a life lesson for you.
And that comes up in your, and that comes up in your story later, right? right? How you listen to the voices and bring in.
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wore a tie on campus as much as I wore shorts and a T-shirt on campus because I was always at meetings and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And carried a briefcase.
Yep.
And so, I was serious about life at that point in time. Yeah.
So now I'm thinking you're going to graduate college and like get into the ag world and go big or go home, but you didn't. So
we didn't. So interesting. And I tell this story when I'm meeting with equity investors and bankers. But my father was putting together limited partnerships with Holstein Cows in the early 80s, right?
Okay.
And so when these were millions and millions of dollars. So the most we ever paid for a Holstein cow was $100,000.
Okay.
The most we ever sold a Holstein cow for was $237,000.
Got it.
So these are kind of big time cows. And so we put together these limited partnerships with cows, just like we do today with real estate, except they're cows. And then we started to do the same thing with dairy farms. So we had farms in Eastern Shore of Maryland and down in Florida that we were putting together. And so I thought, this is what got me out of the boots and into the suits, right?
Got it.
And we rented. So in the summer times at Cal Poly, I would go home and work with Dad with the investors. So I would drive them. I'd pick them up at the State College Airport. We rented a jet. We rented a Citation II jet. Flew them in from all over the country, and I explained to them why this cow's worth $1,000 and this cow's worth $100,000, and kind of give them that education. We'd give them the whole tour, and then we'd ask for for their investment dollars.
Yeah. So you kind of grew up with that.
We did.
It's amazing to me, and because I reflect, I grew up in family business, and sometimes, when I reflect on that, like I didn't realize how much I learned just by being around it all.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you would have the same experience.
In business, we talked about business around the kitchen table and on the farm and wherever we were all the time.
Yeah.
So much so that every vacation when we went on, we would always go and visit farms and look at cows.
Of course.
I'm like, Dad, we're on vacation. Why are we looking at cows and visiting farms when we go? Of course, I didn't know that was a business. We were on a business trip that just happened to have a little bit of vacation attached to it.
Trip, right.
So today, by the way, we go on vacation and we're always looking at self-storage facilities.
I can only imagine.
My kids complain about the same thing that I complained about with my father. Yeah.
Right, yes.
So,
I could relate. We would go look at properties that were under development.
So my plan was that I was going to do these limited partnerships, lots of investors, and be one of the biggest dairymen in the whole wide world, right?
Okay.
And so the reason why all these people were interested in investing in dairy cows was at that point in time in the early 80s, the top tax rate was about 70%.
Okay.
So those who were making lots of money, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, business people, whoever, needed to have lots of tax deductions to protect that income.
Got it.
So dairy cows, racehorses, windmills, oil wells, all those capital goods kind of businesses were all had accelerated depreciation attached to their assets, and that's why they would invest in those to get that depreciation to protect your revenue. So what happened was they had a Tax Reform Act of 1986, and it eliminated all of those tax deductions and went back to straight line depreciation overnight. So that $100,000 cow is now worth $20,000. And so talk about a disruption in your life.
Right.
So I'm a senior in college, thinking I'm going back to the farm to get into the dairy business and continue what my dad had started. And Dad and I had lots of good talks, and he said, look, you can always come back to the farm, but go do something where the government doesn't have as much control as they do in the dairy business. I mean, even to today, the federal government sets the price of milk, which is just crazy. And that's why there's no family farms, by the way, because the families that are farming can't afford to get enough for the product to make a living. So all their kids have gone and went into other stuff like self-storage, right? So what so after that happened, I decided, okay, I'm not going to go back to the farm, at least now. I thought maybe someday I'll go back to the farm, but let's go see what I can do. And Gina, I've always been a salesman. I've sold everything. So I told you about the sweet corn. I told you about the Christmas trees.
Yes. Yep.
I didn't tell you about the burpee seeds. So if you back to the comic books back in the 70s and 80s, there's you could sell burpee seeds and order one. I won every prize, including the raft. The raft, I think, took the most amount of points. Because I sold everybody within I don't know how many miles of Warrior's Mark seeds. So and FFA fruit, for FFA
absolutely.
And high school we did. I was the top salesman. So I wanted to be a salesman because that was my natural ability.
And you knew you were good at it.
People person, good at it. So what could I sell? That I had some experience with. with. So,
Right.
Being around Dad and on the farms, we were always buying and selling farms, mostly buying.
Okay.
And so we'd always been in the real estate business. And so sure enough, I'm at a college recruiting event, and here's this guy standing there in his blue pinstripe suit, and he has his Rolex watch on, and he has his Mont Blanc pen, and he looks the part. And I'm thinking, remember, at this time, the average salary probably starting for like a management job, entry management job at Farm Credit or something was $20,000 a year, right? So then the real estate guy says, well, he says, we have all these agents, 6 offices in Southern California. And he said, our average agent last year made $114,000.
And you're like, wait a minute.
Like, whoa, $114,000. That's much better. So he did not lie to me. That's exactly correct. What he didn't tell me, of the 50 agents that were at that firm, 5 of them made over $1 million, and the rest of them made nothing.
Got it.
Right? But the average was 114. So anyway, I decided to become a commercial real estate broker.
Okay.
And that's how I got to Orange County, California in 1987.
Okay.
Yeah. It took me 18 months before I earned my first commission. Yeah.
That's rough.
So we went through all kind of adversity to get that done. I remember applying for credit cards because I ran out of money.
Well,
they paid me like $1,000 a month as a draw for like 6 months.
Okay.
And I went through that. Used all my other credit cards, went through that. I didn't have time to work another job because I was so busy trying to be a successful real estate broker. And so I just applied for credit cards.
Yeah.
There was a time where I could not afford, I was renting a room at a buddy's house that was about 20 miles away by car.
Okay.
And I couldn't afford the gas to drive down to the house to sleep at night and drive back home. So I would just sleep in the office.
Okay.
And there was a fitness center that I was a member of for like $25 a month or something
whatever,
cheap that I could go take a shower, and I kept all my suits there.
Right.
This is back when you wore suits to work.
Yeah.
And so I would just sleep on the couch in the front office.
Yeah.
I just made up my mind, Gina. I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months into that, I said, I'm not quitting. They're going to have to. They're going to have to take me out of here or do whatever. But I'm not leaving. I'm going to work till I just get it done. And so, sure enough, in 18 months, my first transaction.
I mean, you grew up with this like hard, like the work ethic of growing on the farm, but somewhere in there, there's a "don't tell me I can't do this." Or
that's from my dad.
Okay.
There you go, Dad. Yeah.
Right.
So he's very
competitive.
Oh my God, competitive.
Yeah. So 18 months in, you're working hard.
So I got my first commission. I think it was $56,000. So I was rich, of course, right? Yeah. Which
paid off those credit cards.
Paid off credit cards,
nice.
all that sort of stuff.
Good.
So about the same time, I got my first listing, and that's when I called Denise.
Okay.
Back up a little bit. While I was in college, probably out of high school, maybe a year or 2 at the most, my best friend married her cousin, and we were in the wedding together.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's kind of the first. I knew who she was because, of course, you know all the cute girls at the rival high school.
Of course you do.
And her father raised pigs, some of the best pigs east of the Mississippi.
Yep. And she grew up in family business beyond that,
she did, yeah. Right? Of course, she's a Del Grosso, as
her
you know.
So
they have the pasta sauce business.
Very good, delicious pasta sauce.
Thank you. And the amusement park business as well, which is right there. So, of course, we know her from all that as well. And then everybody was always trying to get her and I together. So when I was home for the summers, we dated once or twice, no sparks. I had sparks. She didn't have any sparks. That's the real true story.
Got it.
So then she was just finishing up her master's at Clarion.
Okay.
And she was going to be a teacher. And and that's when I called her from California.
To say I got my first listing.
I got my first listing. And just kind of, hey, how you doing? And sure enough, the sparks flew. I think we talked for 2 hours.
Okay.
And this would have been, I guess, summer of 88. Yeah, summer of 88. So we talked for 3 or 4 months, and then I finally said, look, I got to see if this is for real. So I flew back to Pittsburgh. I didn't tell anybody I was coming, except my grandmother who lived in Pittsburgh. Okay. And just to spend the time with her, I introduced her to my grandmother. Of course, she loved Denise. Aww. And we knew right away that it was meant to be. And so, we fell in love, and so we got married in 1990.
Okay. Yeah. And you convinced her to move out to California?
I did. Yes, we got married in October of 1990.
Okay.
Yeah.
And things are going well in California.
Things are going well. I had a little BMW. Like I said, I was rich. Right. Making 6 figures a year and doing pretty well, and top 10 in the company and all that good stuff. So I wined her and dined her up and down the coast, and she agreed to marry me, and so we get married in 1990. And little bit of adversity as well. So I have a big transaction. This is 1990, right? So a big transaction in Indio, California, which is near Palm Springs, big 288 unit apartment building.
Okay.
My commission alone out of that deal, I think, was about $200,000.
Wow. Okay.
So Denise is one of 6 kids, and so lots of people in her family. So we paid for almost all the wedding. We had it at the park, the reception at the park. The wedding was at a church. And so I had all these wedding expenses and stuff. And so we're, I think, probably day 4 on our honeymoon in Hawaii.
Okay.
I call back into the office in Southern California to see how things are going.
Right.
And, I talked to my partner, and he goes, hey, he says, you're not going to believe this, but the deal that we've been working on just died. The guy was in a 1031 exchange. For whatever reason, decided he didn't like the deal, bought something else, and didn't tell us till it was already done. There's nothing we could do about it. So I'm laying on the beach thinking, the
just
$200,000
accumulated
which
a lot
I
of
spent,
debt,
a
and
good bit of that already, right ahead of time isn't coming.
Right.
So, and the other thing that happened on our honeymoon was that we became pregnant with twins.
Well, there you have it.
We didn't know that at the time.
Right.
But,
so
several months
money,
later.
twins.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's
not a good equation. So now what do you do?
Well, you do what you have to do, right? So I did close a little deal at the end of 1990, and that was enough money, a little extra money that I could buy the furniture for the nursery and the crib and everything, and kind of get ready for these twins that were going to be born in June. So, so we did that, and I stayed, just crazy times. What happened was most of the country had already gone through recession in 1990. It finally got to Southern California. It was a very resilient economy in California. It finally got there. And oh my goodness. So we said, we'll stay in 1991 and see how it goes. And sure enough, nothing closed in 1991. So halfway through the year, I thought, you know what, let's move back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
her family's from here, my family's from here. We're family people. We want to be around our family, right?
Sure.
And we had no help out there, of course, which actually was a good thing, but we didn't think so at the time. So we decided to move back. So she got a job at Altoona teaching school. So I sent her and the kids back in August. And they lived with her parents for 3 or 4 months till I got back home. So I stayed out to close the deal.
So she's a tough cookie.
She's a tough cookie. Her
twins,
mom and dad did a wonderful job raising a very tough woman who was also super frugal. And so we enjoy the good things in life, but we can live on nothing if we have to.
You have to.
And unfortunately we've had to do that a couple of times. Yeah, we've had some practice and training. So we did that. So then I stayed out and lived with one of my buddies in Chino, California, on his dairy farm. To stay out to close the deal that never closed. We got to the end of November and it never closed, and so I packed up all my stuff in a U-Haul truck, which I used self-storage, by the way. That was the first time I used self-storage. Was 1991. So rented a U-Haul and drove back to Pennsylvania, and we made it for Christmas in 1991. Yep.
So now you're looking for a job.
I'm looking for a job. I actually had a job. So I had been to the ICSC convention, so International Shopping Center. International Council of Shopping Center, ICSC. International Council of Shopping Centers in Vegas. Met this firm that had a dot that went up to State College, and I talked to them, and they said, we're looking for somebody to manage our Mechanicsburg office, and sure enough, I signed up, and that was Bennett Williams, and so it was a regional manager, I think was my title for Bennett Williams, and so I had a job, and it had a salary, which was great, so I needed a salary bad at that point in time, and opportunity to earn commission as well.
So both.
So both. So we did that in 1992, and that went very, very well. So the Stork family out of York owned Bennett Williams at the time, and we were rock and rolling, and market was going pretty well, and I was an investment property kind of specialist. So not only did I manage the commercial brokers at a ripe old age of 26, I think it was, or something pretty young, but I also was able to do deals. So I sold a number of apartment buildings and what have you, which was kind of my specialty in Southern California. And that really helped with the finances, to get that done. So that went wonderfully good right up until 1995 when Bennett Williams was sold. So the Stork family decided they didn't want to own a brokerage business anymore. So they sold it back to the old owner, Dave Schad, who was a friend of mine. And worked for Dave. He was the president of our company at the time. But myself and another gentleman that was actually kind of his pet guy,
Sure.
right? Bobby Baylor. So Bobby and I were kind of competing for running the firm, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so when all of a sudden, Dave bought the company back from Gary Stewart, and I was kind of Gary's guy. He was,
Right.
Bobby was Dave's guy.
Yep.
Yeah, I lasted 2 hours. So I got the axe.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So, and Denise at that point in time was pregnant with our third.
You got a thing for timing,
I know.
right?
The fourth one was good, though. Yeah. The fourth
Okay,
one worked out
thank
all
goodness.
But number 1 and 2 and 3 were tough. So
Another
like,
baby
oh my
on the
goodness.
way,
Yeah.
and now you're trying to figure out what's
Thankfully,
next.
the storage took pretty good care of me. They didn't realize that was going to happen, of
Of
course,
course.
when they had the
Right,
sale.
right,
and
of
I go,
course.
oh, whoops,
Right,
sorry. And
yes.
they gave me a nice severance package, which was
very
great.
nice.
Gave me time to look. Sure enough, I landed with High Associates.
Okay, good
I like
company.
So
Yeah,
great, wonderful company.
Yeah.
So still talk to Dale from time to time.
Nice.
These days, and really appreciated my time there. So started with them just, I think, 4 months later or so.
Okay.
Looked at jobs, bigger brokerage jobs in Philadelphia, running some big offices, Grubb and Ellis and those sort of things. But,
Okay.
But I like Central Pennsylvania, so I wanted to stay here. So High at that point wanted to open up offices, brokerage offices from
Okay.
here to Florida. They owned real estate from here to Florida.
Okay.
And the thought was, let's expand, let's open up all these brokerage offices. And I'm like, yeah, let's go do that. That sounds wonderful and exciting. And
Sure.
And that's what I want to do. So they hired me to do that.
Okay.
And then my boss changed out like 3 months later.
Okay.
And then some things happened, I think, within the High organization that
Okay.
they decided like, oh, we're not so sure maybe that we want to do that right
After
now.
all, yeah.
And I just opened up the office in York, kind
Okay.
of as, the first one of
Sure.
many.
Right.
And they said, well, I think we'll just have York, Lancaster, and Harrisburg
Okay.
in Ross Moines, and that's all we're going to do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not what I want
That's
to
not
do.
the plan, right?
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
when I started looking. So that was probably 96. And I said, hey, I want to be my own man. I want to.
Right.
I came from a family of entrepreneurs. I don't want to work for somebody else. I want
Right.
to work for
Yep.
me.
Okay.
And so a couple things to that end. We were looking at feed mills, laundromats, car
Sure.
washes,
Yep.
and Amway. And what that did, Gina, that gave us a fairly decent income, $2,000 to
Okay.
$3,000 a month in income, in addition to Denise's teaching salary and all her health insurance benefits that we had,
Yes,
right?
which come
Which
through
gave me the
teaching.
ability to,
Yep.
hey, I could take a leap of faith and start a business here.
Okay.
We were just looking for what to start.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the industry? What's the niche?
Exactly.
So along the way, there was an aha moment.
1997,
Okay.
yeah, is the aha moment. So in 1997, a gentleman from Harrisburg referred to me actually two self-storage facilities for sale.
Okay.
Or that a gentleman who wanted to sell them in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and I went to see Ron Zimmerman was his name. Went to
Okay.
see Ron, and he had his self-storage facilities. I'd seen them in California, used them, knew what they were.
Okay,
Kind
yeah.
of a land bank at that point in
Sure,
time. We didn't really know. And I'm like, wow. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, holy smokes. Or something like that.
Something like
Yeah,
that,
holy
right.
smokes. This is the best business that I've ever seen in my entire life, commercial
Okay.
real estate wise.
Sure, right.
And so I did the proposal and I listed the properties for $2,650,000, right? And I thought, this is something. So 3 days later, I mean, how's this for not luck, but the Holy Spirit,
Right.
where Lynn Good, my boss at High Associates, gets a fax from Cleveland, Ohio,
Okay.
from the Amsdale family that says U-Store was their brand name. We're looking to buy self-storage facilities, and he hands me a curly fax and says, "Hey, here, call these guys."
I remember
You
the
just
curly
list- Yeah,
faxes,
right.
right.
He said, "Call
And
these
you're
guys;
like,
they might be interested in
Right.
buying."
I can help
this."
you out here. Yeah.
I made a phone call.
Okay.
They flew out on their plane.
Okay, of course.
And looked at that. They were just done a big deal, a $200 million deal with Prudential, and they needed to buy properties to finish out that tranche of properties.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, we'll take it."
Okay.
And we negotiated the price like right there for $2.6 million. I'm like,
Bada bing.
this is a great.
Yeah.
And they said, "Hey." He said, "We're looking to buy self-storage facilities all over the country. If you can find us more self-storage facilities, we'll buy everything you list for sale."
Okay.
I'm like,
Well, let's do this,
The
right?
window just opened up, and I'm
Right.
thinking, this is
This is
great.
it.
I made
Okay.
a decision right there.
Okay.
That I'm going to be a broker and broker nothing but self-storage facilities,
Okay.
and that's when investment real estate was founded.
Was founded.
In my head was
You're
that day in
correct.
1997.
Sure. Yeah.
So we closed on that deal. They bought it. U-Store then it was the predecessor to now the public company CubeSmart.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
in fact-
Just drove by one the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, huge.
Yep.
I mean, they're the third largest public company now. As you know, we're the
Yeah,
fourth
you're-
largest
yep.
public company. So, I mean, I'm still in business with Todd Amsdale, who wasn't even into business at the time. I did that deal with his cousin.
Okay.
With his cousin, Amy Cartwright. So anyhow, so that's self-storage, and that's how we found it. So I started the real estate business, the brokerage business, and at the same time, Dad and I bought our first piece of land up near State College, and we built our self-storage facility in 1998. So started the brokerage April 1st of 1998.
I'm assuming that was the very first move in.
That was the very first move. Yeah, so we call it 54 units in a cornfield, because it was a cornfield. This is crazy. We paid we bought the land from a guy who repaired big trucks for us, Tib. His name was Tib, T-I-B, Tib Miller.
Right.
He was a character. And so we went and bought this land off of Tib on old Route 220. So you want to be on the main road, it was.
Sure, yep.
And 2.5 acres or so for $13,200 is what we paid for that land.
Okay.
And we built 54 units, one building.
54 in a cornfield.
Yep. In a cornfield. And that's how it all started.
That's all started.
And we've been on nothing but self-storage ever since, Gina.
And so you grew that. You were building self-storage. You were brokering. You were advising. Tell us just briefly about the different types of business.
Sure,
And then I want to hit the next bump in the road, because another bump comes along.
So I was driving 40 to 60,000 miles a year.
A lot of miles.
The territory, because there weren't that many self-storage facilities, and people love them, and they cash flow so well, not many people wanted to sell them. So you had to cast a wide net to do a few brokerage deals to make a living, right?
Yeah.
So my territory was from Boston to Pittsburgh to Virginia Beach, Virginia.
That explains the miles.
That's the miles. And the only reason why that is, that's where I could drive to in a day, do my meeting, and drive back home,
and get home for
and not
dinner,
have to rent a hotel room in Boston for the night. Sometimes I stay overnight.
Sure.
Most of the time I slept at a rest stop for a few hours and got home.
And figured it out,
and drove all those. So that was the brokerage business. And over the past 25 years, we just retired that business in December of 2022. We brokered over $1.2 billion worth of self-storage facilities during that time. So I got to meet a lot of wonderful people and see a lot of great facilities over the years. Some facilities I've brokered 2 and 3 times.
Interesting. Okay.
And some of those I've even bought now for our own portfolio, which is I wish I would have bought them the first time.
And your own portfolio, I bet your own portfolio extends. Like, give me the geography.
Yeah, same geography. So Boston to Pittsburgh to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Iowa. I'm in Iowa. So we have about 76 stores now in that footprint. Yeah. So we did that in 2000. I'm not a manager. I'm a sales guy. I didn't like to manage my own. I had 3 facilities by year 2000. So I started a management company, investment real estate management. A lot of the people that wanted to buy self-storage facilities didn't want to manage them. You got 300, 500 checks coming in a month, or credit cards or whatever. It's a lot of bookwork to do that correctly. And we grew that to the 13th largest management company in the country for self-storage, including the public companies. And then I sold that off in 2010 to 2 of our key employees. They took that company, then grew it now to the largest self-storage management company in the country that's privately owned. And they manage 600 self-storage facilities across the country now. And Alyssa Quill owns that business, and she's actually on my board of advisors. So talk about a very cool full circle moment.
Right.
Yeah, Alyssa has done a wonderful job.
Very cool, and it's fun to just see that. I mean, essentially the next generation, if you will, even though it's not technically family members. So then something happened in like 2008.
Yeah. So the Great Recession. Actually, 2009. 2008 wasn't too bad. The brokerage business started to falter actually in 2007. I had about $85 million of listings that were under contract in escrow, going to settle. And in May of 2007, the CMBS financing markets, commercial mortgage-backed securities, so that's when you combine a bunch of loans together, take them to Wall Street, sell them off to Wall Street investors, or to, don't have to be Wall Street investors, but just investors. And then they're fixed rate, non-recourse, and very stable financing, so it was wonderful. But that all ended because of the financial crisis and the housing bubble that popped in 2007. So when the financing went away, it took about a year and a half for the market to realize, we're going to be in a tough place. So all of a sudden, the market's very, very tough. So in March of 2009, I had 6 self-storage facilities that were less that at that point in time, I wasn't buying any facilities. I was developing because I didn't want to compete with my existing customers.
Right.
So I was just developing in Lancaster and York and kind of central Pennsylvania at the time. And so I'd built all these facilities. I was the classic young developer, way out over my skis. And, all that's not enough reserves and all that good stuff. So in March of 2009, I had 6 facilities less than 30% occupied. And keep in mind that a facility has to be about 55 to 60% occupied to break even. Yeah. So it was.
So there's a gap there.
Yeah, there was a gap.
There was a gap
there was
there.
a gap.
Yep.
And so in two of the facilities that just had opened up, just got certificate of occupancy, Manheim,
Okay.
and the Buck.
Okay.
So two here in Lancaster
local.
County. We're just and I looked at our projections, and I looked at what the market's doing, and we had in our pro forma, we didn't even have in there that you give away a free month, which is somewhat standard in the industry.
Sure.
I didn't have that in my pro forma because we didn't do that prior to 2009, right? So that, and then rents dropped about 35 to 40%.
Okay,
So
wow.
needless to say, the extra money that I borrowed for each particular deal to get to break even, and of course I was so smart, Gina.
Right.
I had I knew exactly how many dollars it was going to take to get to break even, so I didn't need to borrow any extra, no reserve
No
funds.
reserves, right. You got this
just
figured out.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Right.
that all went away. So I saw that a year ahead of time, and I went to all my bankers and said, "Hey, we're gonna have an issue. We're great today. Everything's
Right.
fine today.
So you saw it coming
but
a little
a
bit,
year
yeah.
or a year and a half from now, we're gonna have a real big problem."
Okay.
And so most banks were pretty decent.
Okay.
Some banks were not decent at all. So yeah, we and then of course the brokerage business went to nothing because
Right.
nobody was selling
Yep.
because the price differential between what the sellers wanted and what the buyers were willing to pay with the new interest rates was too great to bring together. Rates were falling, so my existing assets, weren't performing nearly as good as they, had been.
Right.
I have all these projects that were, supposed to be cash flow neutral, and now,
not. Yeah.
upside down, a couple $100,000 a year. So it was really, really bad.
yeah.
Construction business, we didn't talk about
Yes,
that,
but
we started a
construction,
construction
yeah.
business in 2004. We built about 3.5 million square feet of self-storage, over the years.
Yeah.
And so it was a big revenue generator for us.
Right.
So it went to
And that
zero.
went to zero- to zero.
Literally to
Wow.
zero. I just,
Okay.
we circled the wagons.
Okay.
And I remember having lots of conversations with board of advisors, with mentors, with bankruptcy attorneys, with regular attorneys, with my accounting firm,
Yep.
family members, mentors in the industry. At that point in time, I was chairman of the National Self Storage Association in 2007. So I had
Okay.
a lot of friends in the business. Knew most of the,
Right.
if not all,
People
the
you
top
could
100
lean on.
operators. Yeah, and so we I think back to this, and we had a very now famous meeting at the Countless Goodman and Andrews CGA law firm, sitting
Okay.
around the conference room table, and everybody was in there, including my wife Denise.
Okay.
And not the consensus, but most everybody in that room said, "John," said, "you're just in too deep. There's
Yeah.
no way you're going to get out of this.
Okay.
You need to declare bankruptcy."
Oof.
And so I'm like, "Holy smokes!
This is not
how about
good.
that moment?"
Yeah.
And I thought long and hard about that. So we had the meeting, and I said, "I don't think I'm going to make that decision. So I appreciate your advice and consent, but I'll let you know, what we're going to do here."
Okay.
So I thought about that for a couple of days, and I thought, you know what? I don't want to go through life answering the question on every bank loan application
Right.
that says, "Have you ever declared
Yeah.
bankruptcy?"
That is a box you do not want to check.
I do not want to ever have to check that box. To my board of advisors' credit, Dave Meckley is a dear friend, and he even arranged for private equity. If you know
Okay.
Todd Marsteller, if you know
Okay.
that name,
Yeah, I know the
Todd and I
name.
met at the Country Club of York on a number of occasions, and he made me a wonderful offer where we were going to kind of take all the firms together and have a private equity injection. And so I would be a minority owner, and, he could run the business. And I sat in a tree stand hunting deer up near State College for that, whatever it was, a week or so. I mean, I took a couple days and thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
We're
going to figure this out.
And so I just dug my heels in and said, nope, we'll get through it one way or the other. And said, okay, what's the path?
Yeah.
And then so if that same group of advisors, we sat down and started mapping that out and said, okay, one by one, what are we going to do to make this happen?
Yeah. Tell me about including Denise, because Denise was not your wife, she was not in the day-to-day of the business.
She's
so
not.
tell me why you brought her into that First of all, there's
Sure.
a theme there. You've brought advisors in that group of advisors, which you've done in the past, right? You've leaned on people. You've
Very much
brought,
so.
You've brought voices.
Always surrounded
in.
myself with
You've
with
listened,
great people. Yeah.
right? But why would you bring Denise into that? She wasn't in the day-to-day.
She's not in the day-to-day business, but
Yeah.
she's very involved in our business. So again, growing up, it's interesting between the Del Grosso household and the Gilliland household. The Del Grosso household, very astute business people,
Yes, correct.
but did not ever talk about business around the dining room table,
which
the dinner
you
table.
did all the time.
And we did all the time,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So then Denise, we kind of figured out we liked talking about business all the time. So all of our kids, the kids knew about the recession.
Okay.
They
Yep.
knew about the cash flow issues, maybe not all the gory details, and they were younger at the time, but they
Okay.
knew enough to ask, "Hey, Dad, how's cash flow today?
Right.
When's payday? Everything okay?"
Okay.
Some
Okay.
days it wasn't okay. We never missed a payday, but boy, we
Right.
had a couple that were pretty close.
Yeah, made you sweat
And
a
so, Denise was a big part of the business.
Okay.
So I wanted her there. I wanted her advice and counsel. She helps me process things and, hey,
Okay.
how we're doing. Plus, I owed it to her, so she understood how serious this was,
Right.
and she knew
Yeah,
it was bad, but
she
she
knew.
probably didn't think it was that bad.
Right, right.
But also, I took the advice of John Dame. So
Okay.
John Dame's a dear friend,
Yep.
my executive coach, Vista Chair
Yeah,
for
correct.
me, and John has a number of stories where men who run a business didn't tell their wives how bad it was, and then all of a sudden the business goes upside down, and then you have to go home and tell your wife that,
Correct.
"Hey, honey, we lost everything."
Yeah,
I didn't want to ever have to be in that
In that
position, so he gave me
situation.
great advice and
That
counsel.
is, it's very
and
good
so
advice.
that's why Denise was involved.
Yeah.
Not in everything, but
Right.
but I keep some of that stress from her.
Sure, yeah.
But
Right.
she's still.
But
to
she
this
was
day,
aware.
Yeah, she's very much aware. She's
so
part of that meeting.
You were able to turn things around along the way. In that recession moment, Denise was diagnosed
With breast cancer.
breast cancer.
Yes,
So
September
now we have
2nd
another
of
bump.
2009. Talk about a
Right.
bump. Isn't that
Right.
crazy?
You always
So-
seem to have these double whammies. I don't know what you
Yeah.
want to call them, but
So hopefully
right.
we're done with all those now.
Yes,
'Cause
correct.
we've had our fair share.
Yes.
So yeah, how about that for a rock your world moment?
Yeah.
So, but she had genetic testing because
Okay.
her father had breast cancer, and three
Okay.
of her aunts also had breast cancer.
Okay.
So she knew that she was positive for the BRCA2 gene.
Got it.
And so she was having a mammogram and a MRI every
Okay.
6 months, alternating every 6 months.
Okay.
They caught it very, very early, but she made a decision to have a double mastectomy
Yep.
right off the bat.
Yep. Not
And we were done
messing
having
around.
kids. We had
Yep.
4 kids at that point in
Okay.
time. So we did that,
Yep.
and so when you're going through that and going through those struggles,
Yeah.
the conversations with the banks were kind of
It puts things in perspective.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
and
Right.
so they weren't going to do anything that we haven't already been through
Yeah,
and whatever. And
correct.
so her strength through the battle with cancer gave me strength to have the battles through the financial
right.
tough times.
That is
right?
cool. Yeah.
And so as a dynamic duo and a team, we just made up our minds that, hey,
Right.
cancer's not going to beat us.
Correct.
Financial situation's not going to
We're
beat
gonna
us.
figure this out.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it out,
Yeah.
and we did. So
And you did.
Tough
times.
from 2009 to 2012 was probably the toughest time in our
Right.
adult
Right.
lives. So,
Yeah. So the thing that I wanted to wrap up here, and the theme that I take away is this idea of adversity. Like
Yeah.
you have faced it, but somehow you have, I don't know, I would call it maybe can-do spirit, this tenacious, like you're not going to knock me down, almost like this fighter mentality. What advice, what has allowed you to take that mentality? What advice would you have for our listeners? There's just so many lessons in here.
Yeah, there is. And
Yeah.
I wrote down a bunch of them, I guess, over time. And,
Sure.
And so, I've always had a lot of faith. I think as a young person, kid, and young man, had a lot of faith in myself. I think as I grew older and learned more wisdom, I realized I have faith in God that everything's going to work out okay, right?
Yeah.
So He's very patient with me as I got all that stuff out of my system when I was younger.
Sure.
So I have that faith that it's going to all work out for
Yeah.
the best. And then think about the track record that we have, right? That after
Sure.
you go through that stuff, especially you losing a
Your
mother
mom at
or a
15,
father
sure.
at that young
Yeah.
age, there's not much that can rock your world.
Right.
When I was cold calling, I watched lots of people that came into the commercial real estate business, and they would, almost
They would
cry
just
if
wilt.
somebody hung up on them
Yeah.
on the phone.
And
I'm
you
like,
wanted to say, what would you do if you had a real
yeah, right.
problem?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I never minded cold calling at
Sure.
all.
Right.
And so, and it's also that kind of that can-do attitude.
Yeah.
I'm probably
It's just who
obstinate
you
enough.
are.
I just
Yeah.
dug my feet and said,
Yeah.
You're going to have to kill me.
Yeah.
Right. Before I leave the
Before I
office.
quit, I'm just not
Before I quit,
quitting.
just so you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you have that attitude, all of a sudden you're like, it just frees you up. Like,
Sure.
hey, I'm
Okay.
here. Yeah, I'm just going to do it.
Let's move
And
forward.
I think, it's the big.
The other thing that you had mentioned when we talked on the phone the other day is the idea of you're the combination or of the five. What's that saying? The five people you hang around.
You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and I think about that all the
Yeah,
time.
and the advisors, the people that spoke into your
Absolutely. You've
life,
always
the
had the best
fraternity that
advisors.
helped you get on the right track.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And so,
yeah, I was gonna say, any final words before we wrap it up?
here's
Yeah.
one thing we have. We have Gilliland family core values.
Okay.
And 2 things is persevere through adversity is one of the core values, because we've been through it, and the kids
Right.
need to know. And
Sure.
it's important to tell those stories to your kids, because
Absolutely.
our kids, now they think everything's all fine and good, and you drive a nice car and you can do nice things
Sure.
and go to nice vacations. They need to understand what it was like,
Right.
way back when, right?
Yeah.
And whether that maybe is not your generation, but you need to tell that story, because all business people go through that,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So tell them all those generational stories, over time. I think that's super, super important. And so, and the other thing is that ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a sign of strength.
Sure,
It's
not
not a sign of
weakness.
weakness. It's a sign of strength
Yeah.
that you're strong enough to ask
for
somebody
help.
for some help.
Such
So
good
we've always
advice.
asked people for help. I mean, we're obviously doing all we can do ourselves.
Correct,
But
right.
we've asked
But
for
you're
a lot
willing
of
to ask for
coaching and
help.
mentorship
Yeah,
and prayers and that sort of thing.
Excellent.
And I think that's served us well over the
Yeah,
years.
it's got you to where you are today. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation. So many lessons that I'm sure our listeners will take away from this. So thank you for your time.
All right, well, thank you, Gina. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and that was the fastest an hour and 15 minutes I've ever been through. So
That
thank
was
you.
good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.